Rocky Top Insider instant reaction to Tennessee baseball's 13-4 loss to Vanderbilt in their game one in the SEC tournament down there in Hoover on Wednesday evening. Ryan Schumpert is here with me. I'm Jack Foster. Ryan, you were there in person in Hoover, met tonight. Obviously, it wasn't a great night for the Vols. It was a very unique game, them taking the Johnny Holstaff approach using multiple pitchers. Nate Steed gets his first career start. We'll start with the pitching as that is the storyline here. Basically, Tony Vitello threw a bunch of fringe players, fringe pitchers such as Marcus Phillips, Andrew Binky, Dylan Loy into the fire a little bit tonight, and it wasn't a great night for Tennessee's pitchers.
No, it wasn't. Not at all. I mean, probably the worst pitching performance Tennessee's had since the Georgia series. I guess really definitely the first game of Georgia, maybe the second game, and not much of what we've seen. But I guess it's not totally shocking or just outlandish given the people that Tennessee threw in this game. And I think I expected Tennessee to throw a lot of those fringe guys. Like I expected Andrew Binky, Dylan Loy, Marcus Phillips all to get some action. Probably today, if not a couple today, another tomorrow. But the full scale Johnny Holstaff, I didn't quite expect in this one. And like you said, it's kind of a full on midweek pitching approach from Tennessee in this opener.
Yeah, it was definitely different. I know what Tony Vitello said leading up to the SEC tournament that they were going to get these guys innings, and it was going to be a bullpen game. And he said pregame on SEC Network's coverage that that Nate Snead was going to be on a pitch count. Come to find out later, postgame tonight, that Nate Snead, the plan was for him to only go 2 innings. Of course, he went a little bit more than that, given how dominant he was in those first 2 frames, and his pitch count staying really low. Of course, ran into trouble there in the third and got pulled, giving up 5 earned runs. But I do think that maybe Matthew Dallas and JJ Garcia don't get innings. If it was, well, maybe I should back up a little bit, because Tony Vitello did say after the game that the plan was what happened. So did that surprise you at all, given that him saying that the plan was what happened on the field was the plan? Because as you said, it was a little extreme given the Johnny Holstaff approach, for lack of another word.
Yeah, it did surprise me a little bit. I think the combination of that and Snead, like I felt like I didn't expect Snead to go super deep in the game, but I thought things obviously got away from Snead in the third inning, which is when they pulled him after the 3-run home run that I believe made it 5-0 or 5-1. So, I kind of wondered maybe the plan was to pitch Snead 4 innings. And if that was the case, and obviously Lloyd did not have a very good outing. He only got 1 out. It felt like, okay, maybe if they a little bit more from Snead, some of those fringe guys that I thought would throw, Phillips, Lloyd, Binky, were a little bit better. Maybe they stretched them out a little bit more. And then all of a sudden you're in the 9th inning and maybe you're a little more aggressive with the pitcher you use. And you don't have to use Matthew Dallas, and you don't have to use JJ Garcia. So I think the scale of it all surprised me a little bit. The generalness of how they approached it, the philosophy, the game plan didn't surprise me. But yeah, the full scale aspect, that the plan was only to give Snead 2, and the plan was to use as many pitchers as they did, which I think ended up being 8. That aspect did surprise me a little bit.
Yeah, it definitely was unique, as I said earlier. And, I guess we should have touched on this in our Hoover preview podcast a little bit more, as far as the SEC tournament, not necessarily not mattering, even though for all intents and purposes, if you win an SEC tournament title, really, so what in the end, if you don't make it to Omaha, or, get bounced really early in Omaha, so what when you have a number 1 team in the nation, such as Tennessee does. But, kind of using an SEC tournament game to figure things out, to test some things out heading into regional play. Do you like that approach? Do you agree with it? Obviously it makes sense, but just your kind of feelings towards that whole plan.
I don't have a problem with it, is what I would say. I don't know if I necessarily, that's what I would have done per se, but I also didn't think about it for, I didn't put the time in that Tennessee's coaches did. I just think it makes sense. We know Tennessee is going to need more arms than what they've been using in the weekend series, which I guess is Stamos, Kazi, Kirby, Snead, Xander, Combs, and Beam. What's that, like 8 guys, 7 guys? 7
Should
guys.
Be 7.
We know that those guys they feel good about. In a regional, in a SEC tournament, for any sort of regional format. You get it here in Hoover, you get it again to start the College World Series. Tennessee's going to need more arms than that. And AJ Russell can maybe be, and I'm sure we'll talk more about him in a minute, but given how little opportunities those fringe guys, DeVoy, Phillips, and Beakey, those are three guys that felt like could maybe help Tennessee. They've gotten a very limited amount of weekend opportunities, but not a ton. I think it's better to throw them into the fire here in a game, in a double elimination game and tournament that, like you said, isn't going to really have any repercussions on what Tennessee does the rest of the way. That aspect of it, I think, is smart because you need to know what you have in these guys. And if they have to get thrown into the fire, which is very possible that they do, if anything goes awry in a regional, you're going to have to throw those guys into the fire. I don't think you want it to truly be their first, outing of more than an out or two against an SEC level competition or an NCAA tournament level competition. So again, that aspect of it, I think, makes sense. I think it's smart. I don't really see a scenario where JJ Garcia has to throw, an inning for Tennessee in a regional. So that aspect of it, I don't think was necessarily necessary. If that truly was, like Tony Vitello said, that was the plan going in.
Yeah, that's kind of where I paused myself earlier with the whole Matthew Dallas, JJ Garcia thing. If the game's in the balance, don't necessarily know if that happens, if it's tied. But with the game being out of balance like it was, it makes more sense to just give those guys an inning and see what happens naturally, because it was pretty out of reach there in the later innings. But I think the rebuttal to what you said, though, Ryan, from maybe some fans is that, okay, but why is Tennessee trying this and seeing if these guys can seize an opportunity now? Why not a regular season game? Why not an SEC series? But I think the rebuttal to that would be, well, Tennessee's thrown their best punch in every SEC game, and look where they're at. They're the top team in the nation, and they're the 1 seed in the SEC tournament. They're guaranteed a top 8 seed, obviously, probably guaranteed a top 3 seed. So, because they've stuck with their guns this whole time and thrown their best punch every SEC game, they've won more than any other team, or just as much as the other team in Kentucky, and they've set themselves up really well in postseason play. So naturally, it would be this game to where all those experimentations happen.
Yeah, it's just exactly what you said, and we saw it a little bit. Like Tennessee hadn't clinched hosting a super regional, a top 8 seed, until I guess you would say
Florida,
a win or two that they got at Vanderbilt. Maybe they even needed a win last week at South Carolina. I mean, what they ended up with 22 wins. Yeah, I mean once they got to 20, I'll say. So I guess the series opener against South Carolina is probably when you felt like it was done. Nothing. You lose out, you're still going to host a super regional. And Andrew Binky threw a meaningful inning in one of those games against South Carolina. So that was the first time he's done it all year. So I don't think it's obviously it was not on this scale of drama, but no, you laid it out to point out there, well, Jack, for what their rebuttal would be and kind of how you would look at that for Tennessee is because they threw their best punch and they got those wins. They were afforded the right to tinker with some things here in their opener, and I think you'll see tomorrow kind of go back to normal. You get back on that pitching plan. I think you'll see Stamos and Kazi throw for Tennessee, and the Vols be a little bit more aggressive, trying to pick up a few wins here in Hoover.
Arguably, the biggest storyline of tonight is the fact that AJ Russell made his first appearance since late March. Of course, his last appearance coming against Ole Miss in Knoxville. AJ Russell takes the mound for the first time in a couple months. Hits his first batter, gives up a single after that. It's 2 on with no outs, and then gets out of the jam with a couple of strikeouts and a fielder's choice. Thought he did a good job of kind of bouncing back after a rough start to that inning. And only 22 pitches for AJ Russell tonight, as he was, of course, he was going to be limited regardless. So your thoughts on how AJ Russell looked in his first action in a while?
Yeah, I think it was good the way you responded. I think you almost can talk about the whole theme of this podcast and the whole theme of this day for Tennessee is trying to prepare for the postseason and they're the NCAA tournament. I thought the fact that Russell, he came in and he got a clean inning, but he immediately got himself in some trouble and kind of had to work out of it. Chances are that's probably what he's going to see at least at some point in the postseason. Definitely at some point in the postseason. It could be his very first NCAA tournament appearance or something like that. So for him to be in that spot and to respond the right way, I think is definitely a good sign. The velo was a little bit down. I thought the fastball location was good, and he talked about it a little bit that he felt like the feel for the off-speed stuff and the breaking ball wasn't great. But he was like, that stuff kind of comes with some little more time and having to get more reps in. So overall, good. I mean, Tennessee put up 3 zeros on the board for Vanderbilt today? Yeah, I mean, the first 2 for Snead when he was dominant in that one. So not a perfect outing for Russell, but I think a good one and one you leave with checkbox, good return for Russell. He looked maybe not completely like himself, but he looked like a guy that can help Tennessee, which is again the whole conversation. Tennessee needing to find more pitchers who can help them. AJ Russell looked like a guy that can do just that.
It is funny that of the 7 relief pitchers today, Binky, Loy, Kirby, Russell, Phillips, Dallas, Garcia, the only 2 to not allow run were Kirby and AJ Russell, and those are the 2 you figure to pitch significant innings for Tennessee in the postseason. So I think the storyline of tonight, and it's part because AJ Russell made his return and looked the way he did, is that the top end of Tennessee's bullpen is really good. Combs has been amazing. Kazi's been amazing in a relief role. Snead in a relief role is mostly amazing. Russell, if he's back, we know he's the most talented pitcher on this staff, and Kirby's Mr. Consistent. But the depth is a little lacking, and that reared its ugly head tonight in the loss against Vanderbilt. What is your level of concern with that, with Tennessee's maybe lack of deep pitching depth in the bullpen, given what we saw tonight in Hoover?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't really know how I would quantify it. I don't think it feels too different from where it was at. Maybe a little bit worse, but it's just like in a super regional in a 3-game series, I think Tennessee's going to be fine. I think we've seen that enough. But if Tennessee were to lose one of their first 2 games in a regional and they got a claw out of the losers bracket, I think that's where it's going to become really hard for them. And some guys are going to have to step up and probably be better than they have at any point in the season. I do think not all those outings were created equally today. Binky wasn't great by any means. I mean, he gave up a run and an inning pitch, but I didn't think he was terrible. He had 2 strikeouts for the most part. He didn't look overmatched. To me, Dylan Roy and Marcus Phillips looked overmatched, and really everybody else did for Tennessee. But as we said, those are 3 guys that feel like are fighting for those opportunities. So I would definitely, there's those 7. There's Russell to the side too. After those guys, Binky's definitely the one I would say I trust the most right now for Tennessee.
Quick word on the offense. Of course, it was a weird game with Tennessee tonight, and I think had Tennessee thrown their best punch on the mound, maybe in those late innings, Tennessee's a little more juice going to the plate, and they can pull off a comeback win, possibly. Christian Moore had a bad night. He was over 4 at the plate. Shout out to Blake Burke, who had a couple of hits. Dylan Dreiling worked a couple of walks. Hunter Inslee, big RBI double, and Reese Chapman in the DH spot, which we know has been very there's been a lot of turnover there, bunch of different starters, not a lot of consistency at that spot. Well, Reese Chapman had a 3-run homer tonight. So anything stick out to you offensively tonight? I feel like Chapman would probably be the big takeaway here.
Yeah, I think 2 on the positive side. Chapman, I mean, you mentioned the home run, but I thought even his other 2 at-bats were good. His first at-bat, he grounded out on, I think, what was the 7th pitch of the at-bat. It was a good at-bat. His third at-bat, he hit the ball hard. I can't remember where it was at, but he hit the ball hard right at somebody. And then on the other sense,
5-3 double play, right?
That's right. Yeah. Right into the shift. But it was really more of a liner kind of up the middle. But you're right, that was the other at bat. So maybe I sound silly saying a double play.
No, but it was hit hard. You're right. Yes.
Yeah. And then Dean Curley, not that he was any sort of superstar, but it came off his worst weekend of the season. He goes, what I think was 1 for 2 or 1 for 3 with a walk, reached base twice, had a single. Again, good for him, and it felt like on the negative side, just the top of the lineup, especially Christian Moore and Billy Amick, were not productive tonight. I think they combined to go 0 for 8, or at least 0 for 7. Didn't reach base at all for either of those guys. So that's kind of more bad in a game you score 4, but that was kind of the good and the bad for Tennessee's offense tonight. I felt like.
Yeah, Moore and Amick were 0 for 8, and it was a little odd that Tennessee not waved the flag or anything like that late, but it was kind of like that because in the late innings they were pinch hitting pretty early.
No, it was like they waved the flag.
Yeah, I'd never want to say give up or someone gives up, but I mean, 8 runs in an inning, Tennessee's done that countless times this season. So when you're down 12-4 and you're pinch hitting Ethan Payne for Dylan Dreiling in the bottom of the 8th, it's a little bit, it's a little curious. But Tennessee got a lot of guys pinch hit opportunities late. I don't really know what that does, but a lot of guys saw action tonight. I believe the number was over 25 in terms of players that saw action tonight for Tennessee, which is wild to open the SEC tournament. Ryan, we'll end with this, and it's a little bit of a big picture question and something that's being talked about a lot. Of course, the number 1 overall seed in the NCAA tournament hasn't won the College World Series all century. So if Tennessee were to win at the SEC tournament, you'd have to think they're going to be the number 1 seed, or they'd have a really, really strong case to do that. Do you think, where do you stand, I should say, on the whole not really wanting to win the SEC tournament, not throwing your best punch in the SEC tournament, not laying down and just not trying, but, not having it as a priority really at all? Where are you in that camp?
I'm of the opinion that I think it's dumb to not try to win the SEC tournament because your goal is to not be the 1 seed. I think that's stupid. If you're not giving it your all because you're trying to do what Tennessee did tonight, where you're testing out some pitching and trying to find some answers, I see rhyme and reason to that to a degree, and I don't mind that as much. So, that's where I stand. I think in some instances it can be bad to be the number 1 overall seed, where you just have a target on your back. In a year like this one, where there's really no clear, just great team all year, I'm not sure that really matters. But on the other side, the more important side, I don't think there's really any advantage to being the number 1 overall seed. It's not like basketball where they seed it and you play teams that are worse because you're the number 1 overall seed. It's not like that in baseball. So I don't think it's necessarily really any sort of benefit to being the number 1 overall seed compared to 2. But I also not sure that I completely buy into the curse. There's probably a little something there, but I'm not trying. If I'm Tennessee, I'm not trying to, or Kentucky, I'm not trying to avoid it like it's the plague or anything.
Tennessee back at it tomorrow. Game 2 in Hoover on Thursday. It'll be approximately 1:32 Eastern, I imagine. They'll play the loser of Texas A&M and Mississippi State, which is going on right now. I know State was up early. Ryan, do you have a scoring update for us?
It is 3-1 Mississippi State right now in the top of 4th.
So Bulldogs are up. Regardless, Tennessee's going to play a dangerous team tomorrow, game 2 of the Thursday slate, of course. Texas A&M being one of the top teams in the SEC all year. Mississippi State being among the best teams in the West. They are the 5 seed in the tournament, so just out of the top 4 to get that bye. But going to be a good game regardless tomorrow. Would expect Chris Stamos, AJ Kazi stack, and for Tennessee to employ their Friday night plan per the usual.
Yeah, well, I think you'll see a more aggressive Tennessee team tomorrow with the pitching plan, and yeah, they're going to need it. I mean, without having the standings that I'm staring at right now, I think it was a pretty big drop from 5 to 6, and 4 and 5 were super tight. So whoever wins this game, you're going to be facing a good team, and even with Tennessee pitching their best guys, it's going to definitely be a challenge for them tomorrow at Hoover.
All right, well, we're going to get out of here. I'm going to go finish watching the Mavs games. Kyrie Masterclass tonight, so hopefully the Mavs can pull out game 1 in Minnesota. But that's Ryan. I'm Jack. Until next time, from Hoover, we'll see you.